It is early in the morning. The horizon is a dull orange, the light creeping over the jagged peaks of Guadalcanal like a wound still healing. The smell of saltwater and engine oil fills the air. A single aircraft, a relic from another time, sits on the tarmac. Its engine hums softly, but there is a feeling of hesitation, as though it too is uncertain of its place in this world. It is a Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0, one of the most feared machines of war during the Pacific conflict. It was, at one point, the symbol of the Imperial Japanese Navy's strength. Today, it is captured. Its fate uncertain. In the annals of war, there are moments when the line between victory and defeat blurs, where the unexpected, the unanticipated, the impossible happens, and it changes everything. For the men of the United States Army Air Forces, there was one such moment. The world thought it knew the Zero. 4 years, American pilots had cursed its deadly speed, its devastating maneuverability, its unyielding ferocity in the skies. But when a U.S. test pilot, with a mix of curiosity and trepidation, strapped himself into the cockpit of a seized Japanese Zero, he would discover a secret that no one expected. The world believed that the Zero's superiority lay in its invincible design, its aerodynamic grace, its speed, its agility. But what lay beneath the sleek metal was a truth far more disorienting. The myth was shattered not by a battle in the skies, but by the simple reality of engineering. The Zero, as it turned out, could not roll right above 200 knots. A hidden flaw, a contradiction within the very machine the Japanese had so carefully crafted. A fatal flaw in a war machine that once ruled the skies. And it was in this moment, in this strange and unsettling truth, that the course of the war would shift, and the world would learn a new lesson, that even in victory, even in the most meticulously engineered designs, there is fragility. That perfection is an illusion. This is a story not just about technology, but about the essence of warfare itself, the tension between perception and reality, between triumph and failure, between human ingenuity and its inevitable limitations. It is about how one test flight, one simple discovery, could upend the course of history. This is the story of how a U.S. test pilot flew a seized Zero fighter and found it couldn't roll right above 200 knots. The Mitsubishi A6M0 had been the silent phantom of the Pacific, light, impossibly nimble, and feared by every pilot who ever found himself in the wrong patch of sky. For the first 18 months of the war, its silhouette meant one thing: someone wasn't coming home. But before American engineers, strategists, and pilots could decipher how to defeat it, they needed something they didn't have, a Zero that could actually be studied. And somewhere on a remote stretch of island in the Aleutian chain, fate delivered that opportunity in the form of an aircraft that refused to die. Act I. Build up. Before the revelation. Summer 1942. The Pacific War was still young, and the United States was still learning to bleed. The battles of the Coral Sea and Midway had changed the course of the conflict, but the mystery of the Zero remained. American pilots described the Japanese fighter like a ghost with wings. It climbed like smoke, turned like a swallow, and appeared from impossible angles. Each encounter felt less like dogfighting and more like chasing a rumor. Inside the flight testing community, frustration simmered. Engineers at Wright Field knew that mastery of an enemy's machine meant mastery over the enemy himself. But all they had were second-hand reports, scattered intelligence from pilots, fragments of wreckage recovered from the sea, and speculation. Too light to be real, too agile to be rational, too successful to be ignored. American fighters like the F-4F Wildcat and the P-40 Warhawk had been pushed to their limits, yet the Zero danced around them, using its incredible power-to-weight ratio and expansive wing area to maintain lift at astonishingly low speeds. Worse, American doctrine, still rooted in European-style dogfighting, encouraged turn engagements, which played directly into the Zero's strengths. Something had to change. That change began with a storm. June 10, 1942. Akutan Island, cold, windswept, unforgiving. A Japanese pilot, Petty Officer Tadayoshi Koga, attempted a routine emergency landing after his Zero was damaged during the raid on Dutch Harbor. But the soft marshland gave way beneath his wheels. The aircraft flipped, crushing its pilot instantly. For 3 weeks it lay untouched, a secret waiting to be uncovered. When a Navy PBY Catalina crew spotted the overturned fighter, intact, nearly pristine, they knew what they had. What followed was one of the most improbable salvage efforts of the war, hauling a foreign aircraft across one of the harshest landscapes in North America, then shipping it thousands of miles south to a team that had been waiting for such a miracle. When the Zero arrived at Naval Air Station San Diego, it was as though a mythical creature had been captured. Ground crews circled it with reverent disbelief. Engineers photographed every rivet, every panel, every contour. But the true test, the moment that would reshape the Pacific Air War, would come only when a man actually flew it. That man was Lieutenant Commander Eddie R. Sanders. Sanders had flown everything America had built. But the Zero was different. It felt insubstantial, almost delicate, built with light alloys and minimal armor. The cockpit was Spartan, the controls deceptively loose. It felt less like climbing into a military weapon and more like climbing into a bird. On September 20th, 1942, he took off. What he discovered in the minutes that followed would puncture the myth of the Zero and begin the creation of a new doctrine. Act 2. Turning Point. The Revelation in the Air. Sanders' test flights were methodical, flown under perfect weather and recorded down to the smallest detail. The early climbs confirmed what frontline pilots already knew: the Zero soared. It responded instantly to pitch, lifted smoothly, and handled with unnerving lightness. Up to a point, it behaved like an extension of thought. But as Sanders increased speed, testing the limits of its responsiveness, he discovered something the world had never documented. Above 200 knots, the Zero refused to roll right. It wasn't a minor sluggishness, it was a dramatic, structural limitation. Its ailerons stiffened. The lightweight wings, so effective at low speeds, lost their gentle compliance. The aircraft felt locked, frozen, incapable of obeying commands that every American fighter executed routinely. Here was the flaw. The gods of engineering had left a seam in the armor. Sanders repeated the test again and again, confirming the phenomenon, then expanded the profile. Diving, rolling left, rolling right, pushing the airframe to its edge. The results were consistent. At higher speeds, the Zero's control balance collapsed. It became vulnerable, not in a theoretical way, but in a tactical way that could be exploited instantly. For pilots who had been dying in turn fights, it was the key that unlocked survival. The test reports reached strategists within days. In the war rooms of Pearl Harbor and Washington, commanders read Sanders' findings with a mix of relief and disbelief. The Zero was still deadly, still elegant, still a technological marvel, but it was not invincible. The solution was simple, brutal, and distinctly American. Do not turn with it. Dive fast. Keep your speed. Fight in the vertical. Strike and run. This doctrine would soon have a name: boom and zoom. New fighter designs like the F-6F Hellcat and the F-4U Corsair absorbed the lesson. They embraced weight, horsepower, and durability, trading delicate maneuverability for high-speed authority. American industry built fighters that didn't need to dance, they needed to punch. Within a year, the air over the Pacific would sound different. Heavier engines. Faster dives. Rolls that didn't freeze at 200 knots. A new chapter had begun. Act 3. Confrontation. Both sides respond. Japan never learned that its most advanced fighter was being test-flown by the enemy. But its pilots felt the shift long before intelligence reports made it official. They noticed American fighters refusing to engage in flat turns. They saw Hellcats climbing in spirals the Zero couldn't match. They watched F-4Us dive like thunderbolts, strike with overwhelming speed, and disappear before a Zero could commit to pursuit. Pilots recorded their confusion in diaries. The enemy dives too fast. We cannot follow. Their turns are inconsistent, strange. Excerpt from a recovered Japanese naval fighter log, 1943. At the same time, American pilots began writing reports with a new confidence. Keep your speed above 200. Don't turn with them. Hit from above and pull away. It works. Commanders relayed Sanders' findings through training films, cockpit briefings, chalkboard diagrams, and heated lectures delivered in hangars lit by bare bulbs. New recruits memorized the rule: speed is life. Flying became a game of altitude and momentum rather than grace and instinct. The psychological tide turned. Even as Japan fought with desperate valor, its aircraft, once the terror of the sky, became increasingly mismatched against faster, stronger American designs informed by the captured Zero's limitations. Act 4. Human Element. Voices from the Edge. The transformation wasn't only mechanical. It ran through the emotions of the men who lived it. From American correspondents. I turned left, and the Zero stayed with me. I turned right at speed, and he couldn't follow. For the first time, I saw him lose me. For the first time, I felt like we had a chance. Lieutenant James Holbrook, F-6F pilot, letter home, 1943. From Japanese Reflections. Our fighters feel light, too light. We chase them downward, but the controls shake. The Americans survive hits we cannot. Flight Petty Officer Kotani, diary recovered from Saipan. There were moments of humanity that defied the brutality of the conflict. American pilots who faced Zero pilots in the air often wrote of their respect for the Japanese aviators' skill and courage. One F-4U Corsair pilot described a duel off Rabaul. We fought for a full minute, each of us searching for a mistake. When I dove away, I saw him try to roll after me, but he couldn't. Then I understood. Someone had figured them out. And someone had, thousands of miles away, on a runway in San Diego, in a cockpit that smelled of foreign steel and sea salt. Act V. Consequences. Numbers, impact, and a shift in the war. The effect of Sanders' test flights rippled through every major battle from 1943 onward. Combat results tell the story starkly. Before 1943, American kill ratios against the Zero often hovered near 1-to-1. After boom and zoom tactics were widely adopted, kill ratios with the Hellcat exceeded 19-to-1 in some campaigns. Production surged. By 1944, the U.S. was producing 2,000+ Hellcats and Corsairs per month, far outpacing Japan's increasingly strained lines. Pilot survival rates increased dramatically, allowing the U.S. Navy to accumulate veterans who passed their knowledge to new squadrons. The psychological shift was even more profound. American pilots began entering battles with confidence instead of dread. Japan, facing shortages of fuel, experienced pilots, and manufacturing capacity, could not adapt quickly enough to redesign the Zero or retrain its airmen for new tactics. The aircraft once feared as the master of the Pacific now felt fragile, outdated, and increasingly sacrificial. Act 6. Reflection. The moment that redefined air power. What happened in that stolen cockpit was more than a technical discovery. It marked a transformation in the philosophy of aerial warfare. Before Akutan, America fought the Zero on the Zero's terms. After Akutan, America rewrote the rules. Technology had spoken. Doctrine had evolved. And the sky itself had been redefined, not as a place of dueling turns and acrobatics, but as a domain ruled by energy, momentum, and engineering advantage. In that shift, one truth emerged. Even the most feared weapon can lose its power once its secrets are understood. And that revelation, born from a single captured aircraft and a single pilot willing to test it to the edge, reshaped the Pacific War forever. In the end, the story of the seized Zero fighter is not merely the story of an airplane or a test pilot. It is the story of how knowledge, cold, precise, and unromantic, can alter the trajectory of history. What Eddie Sanders discovered above 200 knots was a flaw in metal and mechanics, yes, but also a flaw in assumption. The Zero, wrapped in myth and fear, was revealed as mortal. War often hinges on such revelations. After the war, as American engineers dissected captured Japanese technology and Japanese engineers toured American factories, both sides confronted an irony. The aircraft that had once represented Japan's technological supremacy ended up fueling America's tactical evolution. The very machine intended to secure victory for the Empire of Japan instead helped seal its defeat. In post-war Japan, former Zero designers like Jiro Horikoshi reflected on the aircraft with a mixture of pride and melancholy. They had built something extraordinary, a masterpiece of engineering for its time. But they also knew that in prioritizing agility over protection, range over survivability, maneuverability over structural robustness, they had created an aircraft brilliantly suited for the early war, but tragically mismatched for the industrial hurricane that followed. Meanwhile, American aviation exploded into a new era. Lessons from the Zero informed generations of aircraft, from post-war naval fighters to the jet age. The idea that speed, not turn radius, defined victory became a foundational principle of air combat. Engineers designing the F-86 Sabre, the F-4 Phantom, even elements of the modern F/A-18 Hornet, all inherited the legacy of that one captured aircraft. The psychological legacy ran deeper still. Pilots who had once feared the Zero spoke of a strange moment of clarity the first time they outrolled one at high speed. It was not triumph they described, but perspective. Fear, they realized, had been a kind of blindfold. When the blindfold fell, the sky looked different. And for Japan, the moral inversion was profound. Tactical dominance in 1941 had led to strategic overconfidence. Early victories, fueled by the Zero superiority, convinced many leaders that the war would be short and decisive. But the victory carried a hidden cost. It discouraged innovation at the moment it was needed most. The Akutan Zero, lost in an accident, became a metaphor for the fragility of early triumphs. Documentaries often try to summarize wars in grand strokes: nations rising and falling, fleets clashing, economies mobilizing. But history also turns on small things: a flawed landing, a salvage mission, a test flight that revealed a truth hidden in the wind. One of Sanders' lines from the test report remains symbolic. At 200 knots, she will not roll right. The control stiffens. The aircraft resists. It is a technical sentence, unemotional and precise. Yet in it lies the fulcrum of the Pacific Air War. A single mechanical limitation became a tactical revelation, and a tactical revelation became a strategic transformation. What remains today, looking back across decades of innovation, reconciliation, and remembrance, is a universal lesson about the nature of mastery and myth. Every technology, no matter how advanced, carries its vulnerability. Every legend contains a seam. And in the modern world, of drones, hypersonics, artificial intelligence, and engineered systems, the same truth endures. Understanding is the ultimate advantage. Because the story of the captured Zero is not a story about the past alone. It is a reminder that fear fades in the presence of knowledge, that innovation rises from humility, and that even in war, the darkest of human endeavors, insight can illuminate the path to survival. In the end, the story whispers a final message. Machines may define the battlefield, but it is the human ability to learn, to adapt, and to question myth that defines civilization itself. Top of form.